Hey, what's up? I'm Ray Green, former executive turned nomad entrepreneur. And I recently had an opportunity to sit down with Chris Evans, who is the co-founder of multiple 8-figure businesses, including some that you may have heard of, like Traffic and Funnels and Sales Mentor. We dove deep into how he built those companies, why he was wildly successful in building those rocket ships, and the downside to entrepreneurship, which is something that really may surprise you. So let's dive into that, as well as some of the questions that he got from my community afterwards. This is kind of cool for me because Chris is like my secret weapon, right? Like he's like the person that I lean on for advice right now, and a mentor in many ways for the business. And it's just really cool to bring him to the whole community, right? Like, so I'm glad to be able to share some of his wisdom and experience. Chris has been, he's the founder of multiple 8-figure businesses, some of which like many people in the community know. I think when I posted up, Chris, that you were going to be joining, I think a couple of people even said, hey, I was part of Traffic and Funnels. So some of them have been clients of yours at other programs. So those are, Traffic and Funnels, Sales Mentor, several others. I mean, for years, man, like you've been like a leader in this whole space, like the online space in general. I mean, I followed Traffic and Funnels for a while, and it was kind of cool to see the skyrocket, like the rocket ship of that thing. And, but I think aside from just the revenue, I think what the businesses that you've been part of have been like leaders in the innovation part of this, right? Like business models, new offers, new ad strategies. And I think it's cool to have seen like a lot of the innovation that you've put behind the businesses that you've run. You're an author. You've got your new book, The Joy of Failure, which I told you the other day, like my kid picked up and started reading, which is kind of cool. I've been working with Chris for, I don't know how long it's been, like 7-8 months, something like that. And in that time, we've done some things that from the outside are pretty obvious. Like, we launched this community, which was from a conversation that we had. We've streamlined our offers as of this week. In fact, the bootcamp and accelerator are all in the same platform as the community. So we're starting to see things come together with some organization. We did, $200,000 in Q1 in coaching sales. So from the outside, I mean, you can see some of the work that we've been doing, and I appreciate your help with all of that. But I think the really cool part about working with Chris, and as we'll get into in the discussion, is, 7-8 months into this, I'm way more aware of how I as a person, like I as a human, and my personality affect the way that I'm building this business, for better or for worse. And I think there's more awareness of that and more intentionality, like with how I'm building the business. And I'm really big on, the North Star. I call it Vision, Founder, Fit. But with your help, I've gotten like really even more focused on that. And I think those are some of the things that you don't necessarily see from a business standpoint, like the mindset shifts and the fundamentals that are going into the business. A lot of which, like, man, I credit to you. Like I appreciate your help on some of that. Transport us back maybe 2 years, or peak of Traffic and Funnels, Sales Mentor, when these rocket ships are flying high and you're going, I mean, what's the business that you and your partner are running if we rewind the clock at the peak? Can you tell me what's that look like?
Yeah. So say we were a consulting, coaching firm that were in multiple different niches. We figured out a model on how to grow it online in coaching, consulting people that was very leverageable. And so we started to duplicate that. Of course, our most well-known, the flagship, was Traffic and Funnels. We got together, my former partner and I, in 2015. I was really the ads guy, webinar, marketing guy. He was a sales guy. And so it was just two peas in a pod, and it really worked well together to just explode. And I think one of the things that we stumbled into was our work ethic and our ability to not give up in market timing had served us well. We found ourselves in the place of two guys who could barely rub two pennies together. We had a lot of passion and aggression and skill from being in the trenches of doing the stuff. To a couple of years ago, having a business that was valued at $70 million. We had a team of 150 people, 20,000 square feet of office space, and just so many people impacted around the world. One of the craziest things, though, even at that point, it still seemed like it wasn't enough. And that's one of the huge learning lessons that I've gone through and experienced. To find myself now being grateful, of course, for all of that experience and that growth, but grateful to the place that I've come to today, which is drastically slowing my life down and realize that, oh, maybe that is not the way. Maybe that's not the path. Maybe that's not true success, which, I talk a lot about in the book, and we have those conversations because in that process of growing those huge businesses and the big team, and I mean, man, we built an email list over probably about a million and a half people, close to a million and a half, 1.3 to 1.5 million people, thousands and thousands of people bought our products. Just coming to the place, I look back and I see how much I lacked awareness and intentionality. I was so driven by, I think, a lack of healthy identity, and it was never enough. And for a personality like me, who can be intense and sometimes maybe insane, that can become dangerous, and it ended up becoming dangerous. So many learning lessons in that process of growing the business, the successful sides, but also the sides of failure that I want to talk about because I feel like enough people don't.
Like when you look back on it, do you think it was lack of intentionality or like the North Star, or do you think it was the wrong North Star?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was both. I think because of a lack of intentionality, then therefore it would be the wrong North Star. Really, the North Star was always more. It was always the aim of hitting a higher high. Like if we ever had a month that we didn't hit a new level or dare go backwards in revenue or profit, we were not happy campers. And so it was just, we had to dig in more and drive more because my identity was attached to the higher level. And of course, attached to the things. There was so much lack of, not just looking at the up and to the right, but what about roots and deep foundation? And I think so often we don't value that as entrepreneurs, right? It's all about all the external things that indicate success.
How do you measure success, Dan?
Yeah, I think a measure of success now is operating from internal abundance and a healthy identity. The ability to say no to things, maybe say no to the next level of growth or accelerating your business. I think taking action that's in alignment with your values. And when I look back, man, I was so misaligned on so many things. Like there is this internal conflict on so many things, but yet I had all this responsibility. And so I feel like I had to say yes, right? Not only for the responsibility of the team and just the company and what we had to carry, but also what my identity was attached to, right? Because if my identity was attached to, I am worthy if my business is going up and to the right and I get all the accolades and the platform and all those things, if I go backwards, then I must no longer be worthy of love or acceptance, right? So those are things that there was definitely conflict. And operating from a place of external significance is always a dangerous game. It's always a dangerous measure because it's a treadmill that never stops. And for me, it only sped up, utilizing your skills and talents and abilities in the service of others. Because I think if you're in those places, then you will have a much higher likelihood of sustainability and longevity, which is also, I think, an indicator of success. If you can be in the game and enjoy the game, which is really important for the long haul, I think that is a measure of success. But all the things that we think is success today as entrepreneurs in our community, I think really they're often not, because what if you have all the stuff and lose your soul? What if you have all the money, but you're depressed and you're anxious and your family doesn't like you? I mean, there is case after case after case of that being the situation, right? And all these people that we often look up to, they have so much stuff, but they're miserable. And when I look back into my businesses, I'm not gonna lie, it was great flying private. You know what I mean? Like, and having amazing luxury vacations and all those things. And man, times I felt like a prisoner and isolated and just felt the weight of the world. So being on this side of it, I'm appreciative to have that experience and realize, okay, that's not the thing that actually gives you joy in life. That's not the thing that actually I think is a marker of success. And so now I think part of my mission is to have that conversation with our community. And it seems to be resonating because that's the thing that we all say is success of what you should do, right? That's what the gurus say. And so that's what we aim for. So having been there and done it, I'm here to say that it's not necessarily the way. Now, having those things, I think there's nothing wrong with it. I think there's great benefit, but I think ultimately, if we are looking to achieve those things for our internal lack, that will never satisfy. But when we're internally abundant and the overflow is, oh my gosh, I can operate from a place of contributing to people and helping other people. I don't think there's any greater calling and purpose in that.
One of the big ahas in the past 6 months has been how much of that really is internal too. Like how much of that is requires inner work, deep inside work and work. Because you take my journey, for example, it was, I was seeking the achievement, so in the corporate world, it was I needed the next promotion. I needed the next title. I needed the next raise. I wanted the next bonus. Then it was my MBA. Then it was, I had to get honors with MBA. Then it was, I needed the CEO title. And to your point, it never seemed to stop. And I thought, hey, I'm caught up on the corporate treadmill. This is a corporate treadmill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit stage left. I'm going to go do my own. And then a few years into my own thing, I caught myself as hey, I'm basically replicating the same pattern in many ways. Because it was never necessarily the corporate treadmill. It was me. There was something going on that I was looking to use achievement for it. So if you put me in a different environment, like entrepreneurship, I'm going to do the same thing, right? But until you do it, you don't really realize it. You actually, you make that move and you go, man, I'm finally, I exited that environment. And until you start to replicate it again, I don't think you fully realize it. So what did it take for you to kind of have the aha yourself? When did it hit you?
Yeah, I think it hit me when I couldn't carry it anymore. And it broke me. When I couldn't carry the weight of the responsibility. And coming to the end of 2021, we had so much going on, multiple 8-figure businesses, right? The huge team and all the stuff. I had the ability to withstand so much. It's part of my superpower is to endure a lot, but also it could be my kryptonite to when I don't know when to stop or to honor my limits. And so that came to a head, and I experienced tremendous burnout and just went into a tailspin. But it's okay, these are all the things that I've aimed for years. I accomplished it. Investment properties, money, and team, and pretty much you name it. And finding my place, some days immobile and not being able to operate because I just didn't know what to do. Experiencing intense depression and anxiety. And so that put me in a place where I had to seek other solutions and realize, okay, maybe this isn't the answer. And maybe I went about this not entirely the best way. And so I think it was me coming to the end of myself and experiencing the depths of suffering that I'd never experienced in my life. And realizing that, man, I've been trying to make as much as possible, as quick as possible because of my internal insecurity and my internal lack. But the problem with that is if there are holes in the soul, that can never be fixed with anything because anything external. Because if we try to fix it with external things, right, it's the MBA or the CEO position or the entrepreneurial venture, it just goes to the wayside, right? It's it never actually fills us up. And so then we have to continue to pour in and versus me coming to the end of myself, getting completely burnt out, walking away from the business saying, I can't do this. I need to figure out my life. And then going through internal healing and just dealing with a lot of things I hadn't dealt with and learning how to love myself and value myself. That was the turning point. That was the turning point that changed everything. Because then it was man, it just gave me a different perspective and lens on life and what was important. And of course, I've been married for 22 years. I've got 4 kids. So much of that time in growing those businesses, I was so involved in the businesses. And yeah, I was fairly present as a dad, but I also missed a good amount of time. And I had just a massive revelation with my older 2. They're growing and leaving the house, and I was like, man, I will never get that time back. And that is something that's been so evident. We only have a finite amount, and am I going to spend it just always stressed and worried about the next thing? Because that's how it operated, man, right? My first month, our first full-time month with Traffic and Funnels, we did 127,000 in revenue. I had never seen money like that, man. I was like, what the heck, dude? You know, we had that sense that, man, we made it. And that lasted for about 10 minutes. You know, I got to stay with my wife, and it was like, well, now what? Okay, well, it must be the next level, right? So it's just pushing until it's 250. Then I was like, okay, well, maybe it's 500,000 a month. Oh, we hit that. Maybe it's $1 million a month. Maybe it's $1.5 million. Maybe it's $2 million. Like, it just never stopped. And so I'm thankful for that, all of that experience. And now I'll be able to say, hey, maybe we should look at have a different perspective about life and business and how all this should be. And it's wild how much this message is resonating with people.
Like, so one of the things I would say is one of the things in your book that I love is like the Arrival Fallacy. So I want to ask you about that. But I'm putting myself in the mindset of, you know, somebody that is saying, like, they're trying to hit their first 10,000 a month, or they're trying to hit their first 100,000 a month. And they're saying, hey, that sounds cool. Like, I get what you're saying, Chris, but that's easy to say after you stacked up a bunch of cash, or you've hit these marks. Like, I've got to do this now, and I'll deal with that later. And what would you tell somebody that is earlier in the journey and hasn't experienced the highs of the highs that you've internalized? Like, you've actually experienced it, you've internalized it, it's now become wisdom. But for them, it's kind of like it's a lesson that they haven't yet internalized. Like, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something I've gotten. And to some degree, I'd say it's an objection, right? Because we are so infiltrated and so externally influenced on what we should do, right? Hitting that big revenue mark or achieving that big success mark or whatever that thing is. And so I thought about that and said, okay, the person who hasn't hit 100 a month or $1 million a month, what is the thing that they could relate to? Maybe that would be an indicator to at least consider this conversation and have an awareness of it, because I think that's really important. And the thing that I came to is, when I look back, if I were to communicate with young Chris, he was a psycho, probably would flip, old Chris, me today off, like, whatever, dude, whatever, boomer. Is considering this, like, think about whatever goal that you've had, that you have achieved, right? You had that, it might've been the car, maybe you did get a house, maybe it was the position that you got. And whatever attachment you had to, like, that's going to be the thing. How has that experience gone for you? And I wrote about this in last week's newsletter, and so many people were like, oh my God, dude, that resonates so much, because I think to a degree you have experienced it. And that's having the idea and the notion that this next thing, this next marker is going to be the thing that finally I will feel that sense of achievement and arrival, right? Like, that box will be checked. But like I said, it does for about 5 or 10 minutes. And that is the Arrival Fallacy. And it's essentially a mental model or a theory that we have this idea that when we get to this goal or this thing, that we will have some kind of lasting accomplishment or sense of accomplishment. It's just not true. And so that is what Arrival Fallacy is, thinking that when we get there, we will have arrived. And so look back on anything that you've achieved, that you set out. Again, not that you shouldn't have goals and not that you shouldn't press forward. Absolutely you should. But I'd say, considering the motivation of why, that's really important. Because if the motivation is, then I will be somebody and something, sorry, it's not going to work.
We've all done it at some point in our life with something else already. Like, we may tell ourselves, hey, hitting the 7-figure mark is going to be the thing for me today. But if you actually look back, you've told yourself that, or I've told myself that for different things. It was the MBA, it was the CEO title, and so if you kind of reflect on that, and to your point, how did that go for you? It didn't last very long. So what happened so Traffic and Funnels is flying high a couple of years ago. What happened with Traffic and Funnels? And I think there's two kind of lessons in here. One is what we're talking about, like, because I think that helped create the environment for you to have the philosophy that you have right now. There's also some learning in there for people because it's a topic that's coming up and becoming more popular from an online and marketing business standpoint. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I'd say number one is hubris. It's something that Jim Collins talks about. He's one of my favorite business authors. Hubris is always a starting point of failure, destruction. And so we had a thing that this is also an interesting thing to study. It's called victory disease. It's when you win so much that you think you'll never lose. And that was that seemed like the case with us, where every business venture, just take anything we put our hands to, we won. At least in the side of what we thought was success, right? And the growth and those external things that we've talked about. So the problem with that is in that state, you can lose sight of the fundamentals. Like what is going to provide longevity and sustainability for a business? Adhering to the fundamentals, innovating, continuing to earn it, bringing value to the marketplace. And so I'd gotten to the place, myself and my previous partner, where we had worked ourselves so much out of the business that I think that ultimately we lost touch with what made the business initially and gave us those initial successes. And so we were riding on those successes and riding on that name until things came into play that were just something we couldn't hold together, right? New competitors, an offer that just wasn't meeting the market where it was anymore. Tremendous amount of expenses. Our expenses were 7 figures a month just to keep the lights on for the business. Right? The speed of cash going out versus maintaining the speed of cash coming in, like really fundamental things. And ultimately, with hubris and thinking that anything that we touch turned to success, our idea, which I think from a standpoint made sense. And looking back, I see where and why we made the decision to go and start and launch new businesses. And it did, man. Like Sales Mentor, we got to 8 figures in 6 months. Like it was just nuts. And then my next business, Intelligent Advertiser, again, I got that business to 7 figures in a matter of months. And so to the degree we had a Midas touch to start, grow businesses, but having the perspective of what maintained a business for the long haul, years and years, we really miss those fundamentals. And I think what that is one, humility, right? Having awareness on always what the market needs, what the market wants, and making sure that we are doing our best. Keeping an eye on the 6 numbers for growth and scale and longevity, which I talked about. I'm happy to talk more about here. But what actually makes your business grow from a number standpoint. And then ultimately, the thing that I think was tremendously impactful was our lack of compliance and being hit by the FTC. So we got a letter in 2021 in October. I remember being in the dental chair, right? One of the worst places you can be. And getting a text from a bunch of people, hey, did you see you're on the list for the FTC? And, I freaked out, and because the FTC is a federal government that you don't want to screw around with, right? And we shut our ads off, and that just, man, that really started a huge chain of events where we had to scramble to keep lead flow coming in, but do it in a compliant way. And ultimately, we ended up getting investigated by the FTC, and that's a lot to deal with, right? Because we had our whole business really, according to the eyes of the FTC, was built on not being compliant. And so not being compliant, then also not having multiple sources of acquisition were just fundamental flaws that if I could go back, I would change. Because here's the thing that everybody needs to understand and know. And I don't know what the level of operators are here, but oftentimes what your strength is becomes your weakness, right? So our strength was being able to acquire and grow businesses via paid ads. ultimately that became our weakness, because I didn't have a need to go out and do organic or do outbound or build JV. Man, we were just rocking and rolling with paid acquisition, just one after another. We just had a formula. We knew how to do it. But because of that, when it came down to it, we had no SEO traffic, no really social organic, nothing consistent at least. And so when it came to us having to shut ads off and retool, that was a huge setback.
I think it's important for people because this is a topic that's going to get more popular, by the way, the FTC deal. You were just, I think probably because you guys were the rocket ship and the leader in the space, but this is now making its way to everybody. So I think it's important for anybody that's doing online marketing in the States. This was actually, I don't know if you saw, Chris, this was on in the Kajabi channel the other day. Somebody said, hey, they're doing a compliance webinar type of thing, because not being compliant doesn't mean not being truthful. You can be completely, your testimonials can be on point. Your claims can be absolutely true. One of the things I remember reading in the FTC thing for you guys was telling closers that they can earn, $20,000, $30,000 a month closing. That is absolutely true. I know a ton of people doing it, but if you haven't documented it in a very specific way, then it can create problems. And as online marketing grows, the number of people that got to get caught up in this, I think we tend to think, oh, we're small potatoes, it doesn't really matter, but it is becoming an issue. So I would just raise that for anybody, go understand what that means and spend a few minutes just making sure that you're compliant. And it may mean your promise at the in the copy isn't as strong, but I tell you what, it's the peace of mind of knowing that you're doing it in a way that's not going to come back and haunt you. You mentioned the 6 numbers, the things, the drivers that really grow your business. What can you elaborate on that a little bit? Yeah.
So, the 3 that are most important, and one of the things that really stood out to me is when I looked at my numbers from 2021, beginning of 2021, we were just pulling in so much cash, to the next year, spring of 2022, they're drastically different. So one of the numbers that you must track is your cost to acquire, right? When I looked at my numbers in 21, my cost to acquire a client was $4,500. I didn't have really awareness on this until 22, and we're making a little bit of money, breaking even, or even losing money in the spring of 22. I'm like, how is that possible? Because our cost to acquire was $1,500. I was like, what in the world? The year before, we were making money hand over fist. The next year, with our cost to acquire, we were losing money, breaking even. So I really dove into the numbers. And 2 of the things that we weren't really tracking for whatever reason was our lifetime value. Our lifetime value the year before was a lot higher, and our cost to fulfill. Our cost to fulfill, because of our volume, was also a lot lower than 2022. So within a year, because lacking fundamentals, making sure that all of our clients are taken care of, they're happy, we've seen our lifetime value drop off a cliff. So because of that, now our cost to fulfill, we're still carrying the same cost. Our cost to fulfill is really high. So it just really screwed our profitability up because we didn't have an awareness on that. And I think if you have awareness on those numbers and orient your business around those 3 numbers, you will be way further ahead than most business owners. And we took a lot of pride in knowing our numbers. And for the most part, we did. And I can break down how we did it. But these top line, very simple numbers, we just didn't really keep track of. The other ones are based around time, if you want it. So it's what the time is to fulfill, and the time to acquire a client is also really important.
When would you start tracking those? Because there's a lot of people may say, well, that's an 8-figure business type of thing to deal with. I'm a small agile team. I've got a few VAs. I'm doing 40, 50. I'm not there yet, so I'm not going to track that. Would you disagree?
I would, because I think the practice is good. At least having an awareness to start, because it comes down right. No matter if you're an agile solopreneur, you run an 8-figure business. It doesn't matter what level you are. What you are, though, is you are the allocator of your resources, right? You allocate either time or money. and also people. And so to be aware of what resources you have right now today is really important. And if you are in the client getting business, then one thing you need to know is, okay, how much time does it cost me to get a client, or how much money does it cost me to get a client? And when I go back and look at my early success, man, this is something that we just had dialed in. We knew our numbers and really how much it costs to get a client. And so then I was able to essentially manipulate time, where some things that took other people a lot longer, because I understood how to get clients utilizing, manipulating time, I was able to reduce that drastically. And that's part of how we innovated in the industry. So if you have an awareness on, okay, maybe it takes me 10 hours to get a client, or maybe it's 5. Looking at if that's a resource that you have to allocate, then the question is, okay, well, how do I reduce that amount of time? Maybe that's getting the Filipino VA. Maybe that's using ChatGPT. Maybe that's running ads. Same thing with costs. Okay, if my lifetime value is, let's say, $10,000, what can I afford to spend to get a client? Right? So if you are the one fulfilling, you could probably spend a good amount of money. Right? So when you start to really calculate these numbers, it gives you more precision in being able to grow the business at the speed you want to grow.
And I would argue, if you don't know these numbers, you will oftentimes find yourself just trying to outwork the uncertainty, right? Like you will, because it's fuzzy to me. I don't understand the economics of my business. What I do know is I can just put my head down and put in 10, 12, 14 hours, and I just keep going. And that makes me feel better about like trying to move the needle. But you'd be surprised at how many times a simple dashboard allows you the clarity to say, hey, calm down. Like that's the 10 of the 12 hours you just put in didn't actually move the needle if you were looking at 100% the right thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is a thing I think we did really good from the get-go. And just something that I had to by nature, because before Traffic and Funnels, I was in the trenches running marketing for people. I was doing the stuff. I needed to know all the numbers, and not only know the numbers, but know the standards, right? So what's an acceptable cost per lead? What's way out of range? And so that helped me to really get clarity on what my targets were, to know where to focus and leverage my time to move the needle for that business owner. And then I just carried that over into my own stuff. And I think that just put us ahead of the competition. And that was culture. Everybody in the business, that is what we adhere to. And of course, we, like I said, we missed some of those top level ones that I've not really heard many people talk about, which is one of the reasons why I talk about it now, like what your cost to fulfill is. That's an important number to know. But if you have these, you will have extreme clarity on what you need to focus on in the business. And it's not a question of, can I get clients or not? Of course you can get clients. There's like 8 billion people in the world that need what you have, right? Like the people are there, man. The desire and the bleeding neck problems are there. It's just about you orienting your offer with the right economics to reach those people. That's what it's all about. So if you understand your economics for your business, that can change your life drastically. But we're just so afraid for some reason in actually approaching that thing and putting ourselves out there. But having those standards and idea around, okay, yeah, if I can get a lead for this much or pay this much for a client, then it's just, that is your laser focus on making that a common thing in your business. And if you do, man, it's inevitable.
This is for solopreneurs or small agile teams or 8-figure businesses. Like the fundamentals don't change. And I can attest to it. Like the first couple, 2-3 years of building online, like I came out of MBA school, bigger businesses. And I thought, this is just independent contracting. Like the economics aren't going to be, I'm not going to build a dashboard. I'm not going to understand what those metrics are. But if you actually think about it, okay, if I'm going to spend 3 hours a day engaging on LinkedIn in order to boost my organic reach, in order to get clients, if I start factoring that into the economics of this, like you're saying, like time to acquire, how much time are you putting in to do the things that help you get the clients that you want, you can actually look at that and go, is that really the best? Is that the best way to allocate that time? Right? If I just said, you know what, I'm not going to do any of that, and I'm going to spend an hour a day figuring out how to set up some retargeting ads, right? Or I'm gonna find another way that's more efficient and more effective to get there. Then you can really start to manipulate the offer and the outcomes. What's the so there's if I don't know you, I'm going, hey, okay, take me back to 8 figures in 6 months, 7 figures in 6 months, like the magic touch that was there. If you were, what do you think were the ingredients to drive that success? Was it the ads? Was it the market? Was it the offer? Is there a recipe or something that you would recommend people look for the right ingredients to that mix?
This is very nuanced to some degree. So I'm going to give, I think, practical. We'll start with one word. One word that I think that we had was focus. So what we did was, and I'll break that down and kind of go through layers. Focus in that we spoke to one person with one problem and presented one offer, one solution. So that really honed in our effort required to get in front of that person, gain their trust to where they're like, yeah, you're the guy to help. So that just really helped that process. So focus on that one person with the problem that we can solve. Out of that, we are able to focus on how to communicate in an effective way as much as possible to where they'll raise their hand and say, yeah, I want y'all's help. And so the other part of focus, again, was being very dialed into our numbers. So what we did initially, and again, it's different mediums now, same principle applies. But what we did is we were ruthless on knowing our numbers, and how we operated was gaining clients from paid acquisition. Initially, we got our first pool just from Taylor's email list. He had a list of 117 people. We made some offers, got 3 clients in, made $9,000, and like, okay, let's take that money and invest it into ads. And then I was ruthless on tracking those numbers, looking at those numbers every single day and making sure that they were in our acceptable range. So really understanding, having focus on the economics of what it took to get a client and how many clients that we wanted in a month. So the more maybe philosophical, strategic thing that really worked, and I see this over and over, was having a great offer that met the market where they're at and the timing of the market being well. So we didn't intentionally innovate. I think we just did it because it's just who we were naturally, but it wasn't like, oh, we see this huge opportunity, right? And so we really were able to kind of get ahead of the coaching wave, but we did. And so if I could go back and be someone who's like, okay, how do I want to take advantage of opportunity? I would look at the potential of a starting trend and how I could communicate to those people, because that was the case with traffic and funnels. I think that coaching and consulting was just in its infancy, at least in that iteration. Obviously, it's been around for a long time, but with online. And so we were ahead of that trend. And because of that, there was low saturation and there was lower sophistication, which mean our cost and our effort was also low, right? So that's number one. The second time that happened was with Sales Mentor. The reason why we created Sales Mentor is because it was a need that we had. We were looking around for a better way to get salespeople in, have them go through training, and we looked around, we didn't find it. So we created it. And lo and behold, it was like the start of a massive just market timing and a trend that was going to happen. And that people, especially, it was really we benefited from COVID. And so this was in 2020. We had an offer where we're going to show you how to make money and becoming a closer, right? And I think that was just an opportunity that was waiting to explode. And then COVID happened. People were looking for opportunities to work from home and making money. So again, we had this bleeding neck problem. We had market timing, and we had our economics. So going through traveling funnels and then consulting a lot of businesses, coaching a lot of businesses, we knew how to accelerate offers through paid acquisition. And then the other thing that I'll touch on that's a bit maybe more sophisticated, but I'll just hit it, is our ability to recapture our capital and the capital that we laid out to get a customer. So we started seeing more resistance in 2017 and especially in 2018 because we, exploded with dropping funnels. A lot more people wear this. A lot more people are doing it, right? We create a lot of competitors. And so I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to do this than just webinars, right? Because we would run an ad, an automated webinar, and then from there, we would have people book a call. So this is another way where you can really take the idea of innovation and you look at other markets and industries and what they're doing well. And so I saw other industries selling lower ticket products. I hadn't really ever seen it within the coaching space in that connection. So I told Taylor, I was like, dude, this is next. If we can figure out how to sell low ticket products and then upgrade those people to IT coaching, we could get our money back and we could do it right on day one, have people pay us to build trust and likability, right? Get them into the buying pocket and then upgrade them, and really it worked well for economics. And that was probably the thing that really lent to our growth, our next level of explosion that took us 8 figures, because we were able to rocket past our competitors because we were able to get more market share and not put so much capital out for a long period of time, right? You still had guys who were running webinars and VSLs and all this stuff. So we were able to not only get leads for free, but we were getting buyers for free. You take Sales Mentor, we were getting 400 buyers a day of a $100 product. I mean, the opportunity was nuts. So not only was that awesome, but that was profitable. We were making money on those buyers even before they bought a high ticket. So Traffic Funnels, we were liquidating about 50% on day one. So we had to come out of pocket 50%, right? So if it cost us $100 to get a buyer on day one, we were paying $50, or our AOV was $50. But then we had really locked in numbers on how many of those people would upgrade.
How different is it building a business organically versus paid? The metrics may be different, but is the importance of tracking the fundamentals or the way that you look at growth or the expectations that you have around that? If you say, I'm going to primarily focus on organic, or at least in this season to start, I'm going to focus on organic. How different is that than the paid model that you guys were running?
It's pretty different in that you do have to have the right with anything, you have to have the right expectations. But with organic, it's really, I'd say, more so an investment of your time and energy. So if that's the thing you have to allocate, then that's the way to go. And if you're able to really allow yourself to build an expertise in that, man, that is such an asset you will have for years and years to come. But the challenge, I think, so often is people come into it, right? They're a novice. And so they don't have the right expectation and they don't have the right skill. If you have the right expectation and you're willing to stick it out for the long haul, organic, not just social, but I think SEO, man, that can feed you for years and years and years to come. And if something were to happen, right, you still have inflow. Like for me, I knew that we needed to do it. I didn't have the urgency to do it in regards to that being a priority for our business. Yeah, we did organic, and I can talk through how we did that, but it just wasn't a high importance for the business. And so when we shut ads off, it was not a good situation. So the other thing about organic that I love is the trust, community, and relationship that you build with people. And it gives you the ability to get data without having to spend money. So if you're like, man, okay, Chris, well, I do have more time than I have money, then that's the way to go. Or Chris, I have more money than really I have time, then I would consider testing some of your messaging behind paid ads. And it's way simpler now than when I started. Before, it was a lot more difficult. You didn't have a sophisticated algorithm like you do now. Like you almost barely have to work to run successful ads because Zuck's really, he's engineered some cool stuff with Meta and whatever. But I think the ultimate scenario is being able to mold both, because what needs to happen, right, is we need to demonstrate our authority, expertise that we can help this one person. Now, what is required for that to happen is for people to see our stuff, for us to answer them where they are and their challenges, their problems, their pains, and say, hey, here's a solution that can help, giving value and demonstrating that they can trust us, giving them hope and a belief that not only can they get their problem solved, but we're the ones to do that. That's the whole purpose of organic or ads. So it's just setting it up in a way where you can actually put that message out consistently, right? To build that connection and that trust that people are like, oh yeah, this is the person to help me. And I think that the cool thing is it doesn't require a tremendous amount to have a really successful business, right? Like you can build an ecosystem where you're able to move people to the buying pocket, where you're giving value, you're talking to their pains and their problems, offering solutions and making offers. It's really that simple.
I don't know if anybody listening to this has like a friend or a mentor or somebody that when they call and they're like, I've got a question, they go to pick up the phone, and as soon as they start sounding out the question, they start realizing what their friend or their mentor is probably going to tell them. And a lot of times, Chris, that's you. I'll open up like a telegram and I'll be like, I have a good idea what he's going to say. Like it's, and I think one of the things that's been really interesting over the past 7 or 8 months has been knowing that there's another way to do it. So like, for example, at one point it's like, hey, we're at a point where we need to hire an SDR. Okay. So, and that's just my playbook. That's what I know. It's what I've done. So let's go stack up, an SDR 2 or 5. And in the conversations that we've had, it's like, hey, what are you trying to accomplish here? Like, is there another way to do it that doesn't require that degree of complexity, or that doesn't require a human, like managing a person? Can you automate that? Is there a more efficient, more effective way to do that is more in line with your North Star, right? And more in line with the business that you really want to build. And that may be, the example of retargeting ads. That can offset a lot of time that you're spending if you're pushing organic, spending hours and hours engaging. Hey, you could set something up to automate that. Or the outreach that an SDR would do. Can you automate that with a bot or other things, like just to make a more sustainable business? And one question I have is may seem kind of silly, but how much of the journey are you supposed to, like in your view, how much of the journey are you supposed to actually enjoy? Because there's so much of like the hustle porn and everything that's like, just grind it out. Like it's going to suck. It's got to be hard. And certainly there's elements of that. But I'm curious, like having gone through what you've gone through and like seen the highs, seen the lows, how much of this journey am I supposed to enjoy on a day-to-day basis while I'm in the earlier stages building this business?
I think the place that I've come to now is it comes down to what you allow yourself to enjoy and how content and grateful you are. Right. When we're at a place where we're never content with where we are, I think it's going to be very hard to ever enjoy where we are. And is that a life that we want to live? Right? Like, yeah, I would enjoy the highs and stuff, but so often I wasn't enjoying much at all. But now with way less, I've lost a bunch of money. I was sued by the FTC. I don't have the massive team anymore. Man, I'm discovering how to enjoy the process really, because realizing that this is a life that I get to live, right? It's a life I get to live and get to build. And just when we take a minute, we ponder and meditate on what we have access to in information and the ability to learn and craft a life. Like, you go back 100 years, you did what your dad did, right? Like, you didn't have many choices and options of what you could do. And so our ability to build competencies now and really find our vein and what we want to do, just that alone is like, should be mind boggling, right? And so when we allow ourselves to stop comparing ourselves to other people and where they're at, and really find our craft, our talent, our skill, our ability, the thing that we're put here to do, and I think find a contentment in that, I think that's when we'll find enjoyment. And yes, I think you can enjoy the process. But when it's always the chase and it's never enough and we never arrive, that's hard to find enjoyment. Oftentimes it just sucks. Most often, I think it just sucks because, if we never have a happiness or joy, and it's just always the next thing, that's just a life I don't want to live anymore. And so I would rather, me personally, again, I've experienced it. So I would rather make a lot less money and do the thing that I find fulfillment in, and own my schedule and be able to say no to things that I don't want or like, and create and connect with people and drink espresso and hang out with my kids. Like, that's, I think, really, truly a rich life, because I had a rich life, right? And, man, we got the balloons and everything. Yeah, I had that, dude, but I was like close to bankruptcy internally. And I would venture to say, I know many gurus that people know and they look up to. I'd venture to say that's very similar to their situation.
I've seen, as you know, like we know some of the same people. I've seen behind the curtain of a lot of, seemingly great lifestyles on social media. And I've said multiple times, it's not a life that I want. It's like once you see it and experience it, you go, no, it's not actually the things that I want, which is, I think that's why it's so important. A lot of what your message is about, internal values, being intentional, having a North Star, like and knowing what those things are will help guide you along the way. And I would say if you're consistently in a rut day after day after day after day, there's something's out of alignment. It's probably not product market fit. Like it's probably, it may go a little bit deeper. So your book, The Joy of Failure, which I think, the other day I was shooting you a message and I said, it's almost weird to say failure. Like, it's like when you say, hey, let's talk about failure, we've become so accustomed to not embracing it, not leaning into it. But the message that's in your book about, the fallacy of the Arrival Fallacy, and trying to avoid failure as much as we do, especially if you're building in public and all of that. What motivated you to write that book? And then we'll do some Q&A and stuff too.
Yeah, for me, I think it was a good way to process what I've been through and letting go of the businesses. And I think it's a message that I wish that I had. And it seems like it was a message that people really needed. And it was an opportune time because my co-author, we were talking, she had followed me for a long time. And when we were catching up and I was telling her about what was going on, she's like, this needs to be a book. Like, your story has to be a book. And the conversations that I've had, like, people text me saying, literally, I got an email yesterday afternoon. I was in tears reading your book because it just hits home. And like, there's no counterbalance to what we say is success. And it's just not healthy. And so the reason why I went with that title is because it makes you think, it makes you stop. It's a pattern interrupts, because what we associate with success and what we think is failure. So to have joy in failure, what is that even? What is this dude smoking? but it's required people to think about it and actually dive into it, which is what I want. And I think the joy in failure ultimately is it's who you become in the process, right? Of going through hard things. It could be failure in business or failure in relationships or whatever, but you can either become bitter or you can become better. That's the choice that we have, and that's under our control. And so what I've realized going through the process of what I would consider, so many people consider failure in the past, is man, the gifts that it's given me are incredible. So I think just a reframe, what success and failure is the message.
Well, I can tell you, I was my 8-year-old started reading it, and so we had a conversation about it. And it's funny, at 8 already, he's hyper competitive. He's very, very kind of just naturally driven, loves to read that. And he said, "Why would you like failure?" And at 8, it's already wired into him, and I'm sure I'm responsible for it to a large degree. But it's wired into him that's not what you do. Then you have the conversation of, sounds cliche, but like, the Michael Jordan speech, like you don't make the shots unless you miss the shots. So avoiding the missed shots by definition means you're going to the good opportunities too. It was a really good conversation. And, I think there's been a lot from your experience that I've been able to take. There've been, a couple times that, one of the comments you asked the other day was, what's wrong right now? Like if you're pushing, if you're driving, so much of what we're doing is about anticipated challenges that we're expecting down the road. And if you ever just pause, like to appreciate where you're at in the journey and how far you've come, I think it can go a really long way. There's a few questions here. Are you good with time? Okay. There's a few questions here. I'll start with Ritesh. And he says, this is a really good question. He said, as someone trying to hit their first 7 figures, how do you balance the need to know your numbers really well and the focus on bringing revenue in right now? The former takes like a calm, unemotional state of mind, and the latter is more emotion, high grit. How do you balance that in the earlier stages?
I'd be interested to know if this person is close to 7 figures or not, right? Because that definitely helps with context, but I think that knowing your numbers is a fundamental. That's the thing that you look at every single day. And so I became famous with my clients, and we had this thing called, it was #DoMathDaily. So, and I was notorious for this, and knowing, okay, whether it was a goal that I wanted to achieve, it's like engineering what it would take to hit that goal, how many leads, how many appointments, how many whatever, and looking at that every single day of how many do I need for the month, and then checking my pace. And that was the thing that directed me on my actions. It was the math. It was the non-emotional aspect, because we are emotional beings. And so often we get in our own head and we're like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this, right? We question ourselves. But if you just take it to cold, hard math, and math is not emotional. Like, right? All the numbers are there. If you know the numbers and that's what you allow to direct yourself in your actions, I think that's the thing you start with. And that is the priority, because if not, you're kind of shooting in the dark. You're just going off emotion and feeling, and maybe I should or I shouldn't. No. What's the math? Let's go to the math. And if the math says we work on leads and ads, or the math says we do organic, whatever, that's what we follow. And that's really going to be the thing that keeps us, it's like the GPS, right? That's the thing that keeps us on target and in the right lane. So I think it's a priority. Look at it every single day.
And I would imagine there's a heavy lift in setting it up, but then it's easier to maintain, like once you get it, and the benefit you get from clarity and objectivity. I mean, because there's days that I could, based on emotion, think this just isn't going well. Like this isn't, I'm not hitting the goal. I'm not hitting the goals. I'm not hitting my numbers. It's not going well. And if you look at the projection, you're like, hey, we like in the progress that we've made, actively looking at the math, it tells a very different story than
you're so different.
If you were to create a dashboard for a new business, day one, what are the metrics that you would put on the dashboard aside from the ones that you've already mentioned?
All right. So I think we probably have to assume that this is a client business.
Yeah.
Would that be a safe assumption?
Yep. So,
okay, here's the thing that we always want to look at doing. And I wish I still had this. I did a training on how to engineer $1 million a month. Essentially, the idea of that training was always invert. So you started with the end in mind and work yourself backwards. So let's say, you want to do $100,000 in a month, and let's say your client value is $10,000. Okay, well, you need 10 clients a month, right? Very simply. And so what I would do is engineer my tracking around that. And to get 10 clients a month, how many people do I need to talk to? So how many sales calls? Okay, let's say that, I can close 50%. Okay, well, I need to talk to 20 people. All right, so how many people do I need to book? Well, I'm probably going to cancel some of those calls. So maybe I need to book in 30 people, right? So you see how I start to work my numbers based on what my end goal is. And so if I need 30, then how many people do I need in my funnel, i.e. leads? Maybe I need 70 to 100 to get to that point. And so that's how I'm structuring my sheet. And man, it's just very simple. And I think we overcomplicate all this stuff. And that I'm not going to go out and get a software or anything like that. The bare minimum, get a notebook, write that down every single day. I'm actually not great at sheets. Like I typically going to have a VA set it up for me, say, hey, this is the information that I need, and this is what I want tracked. And of course, you can get really inexpensive VAs around the world to do that stuff for you, if you have the budget. But bare minimum, write it out. Say, okay, maybe the goal is 30 grand a month. How many clients will it take for you to get there? How many conversations do you need to have? These are like the most leverageable things that you do. Okay, then your time is oriented around making sure those things happen.
Well, I was going to say that it also highlights like the importance of understanding your offer, understanding your sales. Like from a consultant standpoint, like when I'm starting out, it's like, hey, I'm just looking for any clients, and every client's going to be a different value. Every client's got a different problem. And so when you find yourself in that type of business, it's almost impossible to really determine like what's the lifetime value of a client and how many clients do I need to do that. So standardizing and systematizing some of those things on the front end make it possible to run your business like a business, even if you're solopreneur.
You're either in I'd say validation or optimization or scale. And the thing, you bring up a really important point. Right now, you might just be in the place of validating your offer. And so the thing that you need is to have connections and conversations with people. No pressure. What's the need? What's the pain? What's the challenge? And connect with those people and seeing if you can bring a solution that they'll say yes to. The yes isn't really, it doesn't matter the amount of money, I don't think, right? It's like our first offers that we made were a few $1,000. Like it's just validating that people are like, yeah, I want your help. So orient your numbers around making that happen.
These people want your help. They'll pay you money to do it. And then from there, if you can get some traction and start thinking through, now the economics are, what is this? What do I need to charge in order for this to make sense and things like that? That's actually, so I think you've kind of answered this one. One of them was like, if you were starting a dashboard, have you used just a simple spreadsheet or particular software? From the sounds of it, like your simple is better, like spreadsheet.
Simple is always better.
What advice would you give your past self when you had that stake with your wife that you were talking about earlier? Like what, if you could sit down, like what advice would you give yourself?
Man, that's really good, dude. That's a great question. It's where to start with the advice. If I could communicate and encourage him to help him to see who he truly was, and that success is not an external thing. And I think that would have served him well if I could get that across, that may you realize how worthy and loved you already are, and that you don't need all this external thing, all of these external things. I think you'll go a lot further and actually enjoy it.
What would it have taken, do you think, for Chris then to hear that message? Like, did you have to go through the failure in order to be receptive to that message, or do you think people can get that message without the scar?
I think wise people can get that message, or the people who long for wisdom, right? Because that's the point of wisdom, It's to not have to experience the pain. And so I think a humble person that's willing to be coached, and has the desire for wisdom and to learn from other people's mistakes, can definitely not have to go through the failures and the stuff that I've gone through. Not that you won't experience failures, but I kind of call it like micro failure versus macro failure. Yeah. I mean, you're going to experience micro failures because you're doing the stuff, but a macro failure, I don't think that you have to go through. Of course, it's not a complete prohibitive to that happening, right? Because you can't control everything. But I think it could definitely keep you way further away from the potential of those big failures. And I think being able to press into the fears, right? Like if you go down this path you're going down, your chance of massive failure is huge. And here's how to avoid it.
What are you working on now?
What I'm working on now is rediscovering what I love and what I'm good at, and orienting my schedule around that. So of course, that's writing again. I'm writing a lot with the newsletter, the Good Steward newsletter, every week. And putting a lot of focus into growing that. And wherever I can, just pouring into people and helping them on the journey, whether it's, a client situation like this, or just an email, or books, or, I'm getting ready to launch a podcast soon. And just being open and available to the right opportunities that are in alignment. So, and just exploring, man. I've got a guy who's got an advisory company that he needs help in getting his message out. And so that's a bit of a different situation. I have partnership in some businesses, just things that really pique my interest, that sound exciting, and where I can be a student again and learn. And really the idea is to stay there and never leave that position, because I think that's where we get the most agility, is staying in the student frame. So that's where I want to be, and slowly building the right things that come my way. And looking at several different opportunities of how I can explore that.
Is it tough to not go straight to like paid and scaling something like on a day-to-day?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm so much more patient now though. And I'm getting back to ads. I want to start growing the newsletter. And I think the beautiful thing about today, again, a better situation than when I'd started years ago, is the ability to be way more agile, right? With like virtual assistants and processes and productizing, so much of the stuff that you teach, which is awesome. But then you throw AI into the mix and how that's changing the game. Like it's just nuts. And so I think you can be such an agile business, but also really successful and do what you enjoy in today's landscape. So for me, it's really discovering, okay, what is that? What does that look like? And who do I want to serve, that I still keep control of my time and stay in a place of freedom, right? Because I'm not willing to exchange that ever again for, quote, success. And whether that's a low bake business and good money coming in, great. If it's another 8 figures or 9 figures, okay, fine. But I'm open-handed with it. And the most important thing is that I'm free. That's it. And just controlling my calendar, being able to emotionally regulate myself and be with my family. Those are the things that are most important. And really, again, man, just rediscovering, I love to learn. I love ideas. I love connecting with people. And so when I look back on the success of my business, so much of the success from the business came from that, but it was very unintentional. Right? Like I didn't have that in my mind of like these are my strengths and gifts, so I'm going to lean into it. It just kind of happens. And so now I'm a lot more intentional around orienting my life and business around those things that I'm naturally good at, and staying away from the things that I'm not.
Very intentional with the boundaries, and what
100%
what success really is, like at a first layer. And then if the if it leads to 8-9 figures, like secondarily, then that's the byproduct.
Absolutely.
You know, your newsletter is incredible. Your book is awesome. Can't wait to hear the podcast. Where can people sign up and find you and get all that stuff?
Yeah, if you want to hop on the newsletter, it's chrisaevans.com/newsletter. And that goes out every Saturday. There's already a bunch of issues. I've been writing that for a year. It's free, of course. And then the book is Joy of Failure on Amazon. I think it might be free on Kindle right now or unlimited.
I appreciate your time. I know that, all this, it resonates, man. Like, it's like your message really lands with me. And I hope I expect it's going to be with my audience too, because we're, it's all about intentionality. So appreciate you hopping on and going through some questions. If we get any more afterwards in the forum, I'll shoot them over to you. But thanks so much, man.
Thanks for having me, dude. Appreciate it.
You bet, brother. Adios.